London 2008. 100 years ago across the Channel, one of the 20th century's most admired and influential composers was born. A century later, and 16 years after his death, London's Southbank Centre is mounting a comprehensive festival to celebrate the unmistakable work and amazing life of Olivier Messiaen.
Why did you think it was important to have a huge celebration, such a big, grand celebration of his centenary here in London?
A certain amount of us believed that the place of Messiaen is very important and that we shouldn't miss this occasion to enlighten his creation. And I'm so happy that this collective construction is at the end so rich and reflects the intensity that this music awakes in us.
But it isn't just Messiaen's music which lives on. A gifted teacher serving for nearly 40 years at the Conservatoire in Paris, Messiaen taught many of the most important composers and musicians of the 20th century, including Boulez, Stockhausen, Xenakis, Festival Artistic Director Pierre-Laurent Aimard, Yvonne Loriot, and British composer George Benjamin.
In April 1976, we went over to Paris. I was very nervous, but we clicked from the very, very first second. I played him a piano piece that I'd just written. It was meant to be 2 minutes long. I was so nervous it went by in one. Turned to him with my destiny in his hands and waited for some sort of response. And the response was, he was full of praise, but he said, "You played it much too fast. This should be the right tempo," and whistled the top hand of the first few bars.
So what was particular about his teaching? He wasn't teaching you how to compose, or was he?
Oh my God, he was, yes. And when I was with him in Paris, I would bring week by week new pages to show him, but he was also analysing vast amounts of music and different approaches also. In a way, it was, in a very gentle way, it was a class in philosophy of music as well.
Messiaen's own philosophy had been rooted since an early age in an unshakable Catholic faith which dominated his music, giving it a soaring spirituality from the very beginning, leading to dozens of pieces for organ, and the young Messiaen being appointed organist of l'Église de la Trinité in Paris, a role which he kept for 60 years until his death in 1992, with the only major interruption being the outbreak of the Second World War in Europe.
When he was a prisoner of war in Stalag 7A, I think it is, in 1940-41, in a desolate wintry landscape with everybody presumably incredibly hungry, sad, lost, that there would be a queue to see him after the workday of people just wanting to talk to him. He wasn't a priest. They knew he was a musician, but apparently people found it very comforting, his fellow prisoners talking to him.
Remarkably, as a prisoner of war, Messiaen managed to continue working, with his compositions growing in stature and range throughout his incarceration. This culminated in a performance by a pioneering prison ensemble, consisting of a then unthinkable combination of clarinet, violin, cello, and the composer himself on the piano. The group premiered Messiaen's new work, entitled A Quartet for the End of Time. After being released later that year, Messiaen returned to his organ, his composition, and began his long career at the Paris Conservatoire.
This picture was taken during his last year teaching the Conservatoire, and there are all his students around him, including, I regret to say, me on his right-hand side. I was spoilt rotten, and he always made me sit there. And you can see in the picture that he's very happy, and he was happy in the class.
It is perhaps fitting that this teacher of teachers manages to continue to claim a list of notable devotees, including Gillian Weir, Olivier Latry, and Pierre Boulez, all of whom performed during the festival. But Messiaen's influence runs even further, with devoted fans across the musical spectrum. So
you're involved in pop music, but how did you come to... What was your first experience of the music of Messiaen?
Oh, I think somebody played a record at school of Oiseau Exotique, and that made an impression. I'd never heard anything like that. I remember the album cover as well. It had this fantastically lush picture of sort of exotic foliage and exotic birds on it. And then you heard this thing, and there was a very strong sensual connection.
What do you think about the use of sounds of nature, particularly the bird song in Messiaen's music? Is that something that's ever interested you as a composer?
It's fantastic that someone's actually done that. And not only that, he obviously had a technique whereby, and an ear whereby he could take a effectively natural sound and notate it.
Bird songs mean a lot. It reflects his love for nature, but also his ability to hear the world. How precise he could write the bird songs, how careful he would make a transcription of them. Now what's interesting is how he used them. Using this source that is not human.
One of the early highlights of this festival, of course, is the enormous Turangalila Symphony, and you're playing the solo piano part together with all these percussion instruments at the first. It's the most extraordinarily colourful, over-the-top piece. Do you like performing it?
As one says, sometimes you find everything in Turangalila. So every listener can find a level of interest. First of all, it's a firework of sounds, rhythm, colors. Second of all, this is a piece with a lot of exoticism, with the presence of a kind of arrangement of the gamelan. At the very end, you find the main theme, inspirational theme of the symphony, the impossible love. This was Messiaen's own story. And the way how Messiaen, so positive and so full of energy, treated and transformed this theme to a kind of immense cosmic dance.
But of course, what's so amazing about it is the use of the ons martineau, because that's something I'm very interested in, is the idea of expanding an orchestra to include new invented instruments.
Just explain what the old martineau is.
I mean, it's one of these kind of things where it's an early synthesizer, but somehow there were already inside it a million innovations which in a way haven't been surpassed. It also had this kind of ring that you put on, that you put over a strip, which would give you the pitch. So you played it almost as a continuous, you could play microtones on it really easily, So straight away it blew away the idea of the 12 notes of the keyboard. It's really quite rock and roll. It's a loud instrument, He obviously, maybe as an organist, he was into that kind of, power that you can get from an organ, and then he transplanted it into the orchestra.
Another highlight of the festival is the appearance of the Ensemble Intercontemporain, founded by Boulez as a bastion for new experimental music. The ensemble will be conducted by Boulez for the festival's finish later in the year, but also opens the festival.
You're opening the festival with the Canyons to the Stars, from the Canyons to the Stars, which is the name that we've given to the whole festival. How do you approach it?
I think it's a very fascinating piece because it's not. The writing is very sudden in a way, as I feel it. Everything is happening in the moment. I'm hoping to invite people to be in the moment and not expecting it to be anything else that it is. But it has these eruptions of things, and then it has the long lines, and it's really changing all the time, as nature is as well.
Do you feel in Paris, how do you feel in France the legacy of Messiaen is regarded? Do you think his influence is still important in French music?
Yes, I think maybe his influence is not visible in a way that it would be expressed in the daily life, but I think it's definitely present because the sound of his music is very French. It's probably the same kind of influence as Sibelius has in Finland. In some way, he's always there.
With concerts throughout the year, including a complete cycle of his organ works in churches and cathedrals across London, and many informal events, talks and workshops, 2008 is undoubtedly the year of Messiaen.
Sort of guy you immediately think, I'd like to meet this person.
For me, the sound world is extremely seductive.
The man had some mysterious form of awe about him, that's all I can say.
I hope that for a large audience, the richness of Messiaen music will be shared.